Hello everyone. Today we're going to be taking a look at a couple lessons that have to do with music and distance learning. A little bit more specifically, we're going to be looking at video conferencing and how it can be used in a music making scenario. Now there's definitely a lot of research on this, and there's been more as the technology has advanced. Early on, efforts in video conferencing with music making have not been great, as the technology simply has not been able to replicate the immediate responses needed by live musicians. Now, there is definitely research to support this. Here's a few articles that I looked at previously in my searching project, but there have been more and more as technology has advanced. So let's take a look at the first lesson. The first lesson is designed to be an early lesson from what is approximately a 9-week online course. It includes an early performance, much like a pretest, by a student via video conferencing. Other students in the class, while not performing, will create a combined critique document for the performer. That document will be based on the MSBOA adjudication sheet. We're going to take a quick peek at that just to see what areas are used here. Now, there's a lot of space on here that is used by MSBOA in their official solo and ensemble festivals. But for our purposes, what we're looking at here is this section on the right that has to do with tone, intonation, rhythm, technique, and interpretation. And we can also see there's some subcategories there as well. And those categories are going to guide the comments by students for a performance. That document created by students will then be shared with the performers, which will help create their plans for the rest of the term. So what are we using? As far as websites or software goes, there's some here that we're familiar with, but others maybe not so much. One here is this Remote Music Studio class, which has been designed using Weebly, and we're not going to look at the entire class, but we are going to take a quick peek at the syllabus just to see that the course does meet some of the Michigan Merit Curriculum music standards, but also to see that it is an approximately 9-week course. And right now we're looking at about week 1, maybe week 2 of the course, whereas lesson 2, which we'll get to in a bit, we'll be looking at something here towards the end. The other aspect of this that we may not be familiar with is going to be smart music. Now, you may be familiar with Google Hangouts or Google Docs, but smart music may be foreign to you unless you're a music teacher. And the simplest way I can put it for you is smart music is a lot like Guitar Hero, only instead of a pretend instrument, it's a real instrument. But what we're going to be using it for primarily is for accompaniment. That is providing that piano background for most solos. Now, this is optional. If a student has access to a piano player regularly, they are certainly welcome to use that piano player. But for many, having the smart music accompaniment available might be simpler. As far as hardware goes, we have nothing too out of the ordinary. A computer with high-speed internet, microphone, speaker, headphones, and a webcam are all that are needed. A quick note, for anybody who needs a microphone, Smart Music also has a microphone available for sale through their website to be used with their program that would be perfectly suitable for the rest of this course. So what skills and knowledge do we need to move forward here? As a teacher, you're going to need some knowledge of pedagogy and literature on all of the instruments. An ability to sit down with any student on any instrument and still give valuable feedback is imperative. The teacher should be well versed with all of the equipment needed for the course before beginning. For students who are unfamiliar with the technology required, the teacher should be able to either create or locate a suitable tutorial. The website we looked at previously for Remote Music Studio has been created using Weebly. It's not necessarily required the teacher be familiar with Weebly here, as this course could potentially be hosted on any kind of server, be it Weebly or Wix or even something more formal such as Blackboard. Students should be a high school musician with the ability to sight read grade 3 literature with some success. This is about where you would expect a 9th or 10th grade student to be who is somewhat serious about private study on their instrument. Some basic computer and internet navigation skills are required. It's not necessary for students to know all of the software needed for the course, although some familiarity may be helpful. So what are we doing? What are we making? As the performer, the student is going to be creating that initial performance via webcast for the rest of their class. This is going to be done likely using smart music accompaniment. The student should also be prepared to share any important information that they may have at that time, such as, is the piece of music based on a folk tune? Maybe it's written for a different instrument originally. If known, that information should be shared with the rest of the class. It's also important to keep in mind that this performance is not a finished product by any means. This is simply the baseline for what will happen over the rest of the course and in Lesson 2. As an audience member, students will collaborate on a shared Google Doc that will offer critique on that initial performance. Now that critique, again, will use the MSBOA adjudication sheet as a guideline, so we have some commonality in what we are critiquing. Each comment should be as specific as possible or as needed, sometimes offering measure numbers or other landmarks in the music for performers. Suggestions would also be appreciated as far as maybe how to go about improving something. It is okay for opinions here to differ. In fact, it's somewhat expected. Ultimately, the performer will make the decision on what to do, but having a variety of opinions certainly wouldn't be a bad place to start. So what are the ups and downs of this lesson? As far as advantages go, this is certainly an opportunity for students who don't have access to music education to have that type of access. Most of the tools required here are free. It is certainly encouraging critical listening skills, which can be applied to any music learning scenario. Student-created resources, also always valuable for their peers, and the shared opinions and discussion also provide a valuable experience in critiquing music. As far as disadvantages go, we are definitely reliant on internet access, and depending on the student, if they do not have access to smart music, that could be a deal breaker here. Some students may need to go out and purchase a microphone or speakers, although many might already have that kind of access on their own. From a teacher standpoint, pedagogy may need to be adapted to the distance learning scenario, whereas live learning allows for certain hands-on approaches. Those will simply not be available in a video conference format. And since it is possible for some students to be taking the course who are not from Michigan, they may be unfamiliar with the MSBOA adjudication sheet. Even though most states do have similar forms, the specific one from Michigan may be unfamiliar. So it's just something to keep in mind. What instructional strategies are we using here? We definitely have the performance pre-test. We have peer assessment, collaborative learning, distance learning, guided student practice, and setting objectives by way of the student critique and providing feedback. These are all important moving forward in the rest of the course. And these are just some of the strategies used here in this lesson and over the course. As we move into Lesson 2, we're going to have a whole lot of similarities. However, there are going to be some very noticeable differences as well. And that's where we're going to focus here in this presentation, on the differences. This is the culminating lesson from what is approximately, again, a 9-week course. This is the final performance of the previously performed piece of music. So whereas our first lesson was on one of the very first performances, this is on the final performance. This lesson also incorporates some information from other lessons or projects finished in completion of the course, including some historical research and music theory analysis. Audience members will again be offering critique, but this time they're going to be using that original document as a guideline so they can refer back to that, and this time their comments can be more follow-up to what they did previously. A lot of what we use in this course is going to be the same, for this lesson is going to be the same as what we used in the previous lesson. The websites and software are all the same, the hardware is all the same. The differences this time are going to come by way of Prezi and Google Slides. We'll get into that in just a moment. Prior skills and knowledge required, again, for the teacher, they're going to need to be well versed in some online presentation skills. Again, some familiarity with Prezi or Google Slides would be helpful. As the students are choosing their own music to perform here, it's possible that the digital program notes being created for this lesson could come from a lot of different places. So the teacher may have to do some background work just to make sure they're prepared. And finally, the teacher is going to need to be able to compile all of that information into one document for the class to reference later. Students are going to need to have completed everything from the 9-week course, including the research, the theory and form analysis, and a series of lessons. Not required, but some presentation tools are going to be needed here, and some experience would also be helpful. As far as what we are doing and making, as the performer, we're giving that final performance, again, likely using smart music. This final performance is going to be based on having had lessons over the length of the course, again, by a video conferencing. The big difference here is that the performer is also going to be creating program notes. Now, program notes provide some context, some important background information on a piece of music. Now, these notes here have not been created specifically for this class, though what is expected of the students would likely be similar. These notes here have been created for a piece of music by Mozart, and we can see that they include some historical information. And as we move forward here, we get some videos on the pieces, which we're going to skip over, though they would certainly be worthwhile. But we also get some music theory information, some analysis on each part of the music. After those digital program notes are presented, there would also be some Q&A from audience to performer. Audience members are going to fill similar roles, with the biggest difference being that now they're referring back to their original comments and comparing them to what is happening now in the current performance. So they can explore where the areas addressed in the original document, where the areas of concern addressed, were suggestions followed, or was something else done. As far as advantages and disadvantages go, this is a direct growth measurement. So we're looking at a pre-test to a post-test. We're using previously saved comments to gauge how effective the class has been. And the notes are a culmination of many other projects. As far as disadvantages go, it's a lot of information, and there's not a lot of time in the course set aside for learning that technology. As far as instructional strategies go, we do have a post-test, we have reflection, we have scaffolded instruction, cooperative learning, all of these things coming together as students look back on what they've done over 9 weeks. So how does this apply to other areas? Does it transfer? General ideas of video conferencing certainly transfer. Music teaching and learning via video conferencing definitely transfer, although there are definitely still problems with group music making. The critical listening skills practiced here can definitely be applied to any music classroom. But it's important to keep in mind the goal is not necessarily to create skills that transfer, and rather just to provide a single positive experience. So we do have a lot of references here to look over, although some is public domain. But thank you very much, and I hope that this lesson has been worthwhile.